Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Anya.
And I'm Raghav.
So today we're talking about something quiet but powerful. What happens when institutions make promises to young people and then can't keep them?
Right. And we're not talking about mindset or skill gaps. We're asking what if societies actually created an aspirational person, made huge promises to that person, and then couldn't really deliver them at scale?
Exactly. We're looking at three countries India, Japan, and China. Different contexts, but one clear pattern. In all three, the system created more aspiration than it could actually absorb.
Let's start with India. Anya, what should we grasp first in this?
The scale is the first thing. By 2010, one in every three Indians was between 10 and 24 years old. That's not just a number. It means every institution meant to receive young people into adult life was suddenly handing way more people than it was ever built for.
And those institutions were already declining. In Uttar Pradesh, where the best research comes from, young men in the early 2000s faced three pressures at once: demographic, institutional, and economic. The demographic piece is pretty straightforward. Nearly 50% more men between the ages of 15 and 29 were there than between the ages of 30 and 44. That imbalance strains everything downstream.
And institutionally, fiscal cuts through the 90s gutted public higher education. Colleges became overcrowded and underfunded. Degrees stopped being a reliable signal of capability. So credentials lost value, just as institutions declined. That's a brutal combination.
And then economic liberalization. We hear it as India's rise, right? Private sector growth, new opportunity. But for non elite, educated young men, it meant the disappearance of that one path that historically worked for them: government jobs, clerical roles, civil service.
And the private sector didn't fill the gap. Not in volume, not in security, not in the kind of work these men were prepared to do. So, who gets left behind? The people in the middle, not the small elite with quality education, not the large base who never finished secondary school. It's the ones who did everything, who have certificates and who are stuck between what those certificates promised and a labor market that won't honor that promise.
And this is where time pass becomes the key. Anya, can you walk us through what that actually means?
Absolutely. In everyday Hindi, time pass just means killing time. But sociology, it's much more. These men built an entire social world inside the conditions of waiting, moving through public space, debating politics at tea stalls, maintaining friendships and networks. From the outside, it looks like idleness. From the inside, it's active performance of an identity. The educated, articulate, politically aware man kept alive through collective practice because the formal economy offers no other way to sustain it. And they themselves distinguish time pass from time waste. Time waste was shameful, purposeless drifting. Time pass was purposeful and a way of holding on to dignity when the institution that was supposed to confirm that dignity had failed to show up.
Ananya, is there a gender dimension here?
Yes, and it's crucial. The entire social world circulating in public space as a marker of status that's available to men. Women navigating to the same economic conditions face completely different constraints on where they can go and be seen. The experience of waiting is not the same for everyone.
And politically speaking, where do we see ourselves?
The educated unemployed in UP show up disproportionately at moments of mobilization. Student agitations, protest movements, electoral disruption, not accidental. These are people with time, organizational capacity, social networks built through shared time pass, and a structural grievance framed as a personal failure. Chatterjee's concept of political society helps here. These are people who are related to the state, not through formal channels, but through collective pressure and disruption.
Powerful. Okay, let's shift to Japan. Anya, what's the difference here?
Okay, so how was Japan's post war system designed?
Well, Japan organized society around three pillars: school, family, and cooperation. Not separate, but a pipeline. School disciplined and sorted, whereas family provided support. And the cooperation, that is the institutes where a person work, was the endpoint. endpoint was the permanent employment, seniority based wages, and crucially, a source of identity. The company wasn't just where you worked, it was who you were. For decades, this delivered middle class growth, real social mobility, and the salaryman ideal: total loyalty, total membership, and total security.
Then 1991 happens. What changed?
Well, the bubble collapsed. Companies can't sustain lifetime employment. They have to shift to short term, irregular contracts. And because of these irregular contracts for young people and the seniority system still being there, the only people who got hit due to that was the young people. And by the mid 2000s, half of workers aged 15 to 24 were in irregular employment.
So, what does irregular employment really mean in Japan?
So it's very nuanced. It's not just about income. It means losing access to the entire social structure that stable employment would have provided you. Marriage rates fall, fertility rate falls. Surveys show that 90% of young people want to marry and have a family, but the precondition is a stable job for that, and that condition has been removed. So the whole sequence the enterprise society was built around just stops working.
Where does this become most visible?
Well, in the freeter class, the word was coined in 1989 as marketing freedom, flexibility, and alternative to a rigid corporate life. But after the collapse, what was sold as a choice becomes a condition. People enter at 18, still there at 35, without the status or security or any social capital that the permanent employment was supposed to build for them.
Okay, so how does the public respond to all of this?
Almost entirely moralistically. Freeters were framed as soft, uncommitted people and insufficiently adult. One sociologist even coined parasite singles for those living alone at home. But if 60% of unmarried men aged between 20 to 34 lived with parents because their economic infrastructure is gone, that moralizing isn't just wrong, it's doing something very specific. It takes structural failure and turns it into a character flaw. That's some ideological work right there.
And at the furthest end, what about hikikomori?
Well, around 1.5 million people in some form of are in some form of total social withdrawal. Now, what's striking is the proportion of people describing their experience as not a form of anger or any material deprivation. They describe their experience as that of a superfluous experience. This means having no ibasho. Ibasho basically means having no place in the social world where you belong to. Now, the enterprise society told people that their worth came from institutional participation. The institution left, and what remains is a self with no language for its own existence outside this framework. It's not just an economic crisis, it's a sort of crisis of social meaning.
Is withdrawal the only response we see?
No, and this is crucial because what emerges here is a politics of care. Freeters Union and the activist networks are organized around the idea of TAME, which is essentially the accumulated social reserves, connections, and credibility that enable individuals to withstand shocks. The central argument is that poverty in contemporary Japan is not merely material, it is relational. The political response, therefore, lies in collectively rebuilding these reserves outside and in opposition to the very system that eroded them in the first place.
But I'm sure there's a contradiction here, right?
Yes, at the very moment when the enterprise society fails its young people, the Japanese state constructs a global brand around youthful creativity. J. Cool, Pokemon, Harajuku, and other forms of soft power. The flexibility, the communicative ease, and networked playfulness of youth are celebrated as the new national identity. Yet, these are precisely the qualities that render young people disposable within the labor market. The cultural economy valorizes what the political economy penalizes. In this way, J. Cool transforms precarity into lifestyle. The brand is youth, while the actual young people themselves are rendered structurally surplus.
That's powerful. Okay. Let's go to China, Raghav. How do we frame this one?
So, before understanding that, Anya, firstly tell me what's the ideological foundation in China?
Meritocracy. The Gaokao, the National University Entrance Exam, is the concrete expression of a promise. Where you come from doesn't determine where you end up. One exam, formally the same for everyone, apparently neutral, and the entire social apparatus organizes around that exam with a level of collective investment. That's genuinely hard to overstate.
But if the exam is the same, where does the inequality actually enter?
Great question. The meritocracy performs equality at the point of measurement. While everything feeding into the measurement is deeply unequal, take the Huku system, household registration. It legally ties access to educational resources to your place of origin. A child from a rural province isn't just economically disadvantaged, the disadvantage is built into the system before they've answered a single question.
And credential inflation has gone so far that a bachelor's degree is now a floor, not a differentiator. So, what's the response to that?
Keep going. Postgraduate degrees, international qualification certificates. But here's the catch, Raghav. Who can actually sustain that? Not the first generation student whose family already went into debt for an undergraduate degree.
So, class advantage doesn't really disappear when a rural student gets into university, right?
Exactly. The concept of inherited time inequalities capture this. Class advantage shows up as the capacity to keep going. The urban elite students can fund a master's, a year abroad, an unpaid internship that builds the right network. The rural students cannot. The gap doesn't close, it reproduces itself through the very mechanism that was supposed to close it.
So, the Gao cow starts at the finish line and calls the race fair. So, what does that do emotionally to the students who don't advance?
They're left with no structural explanation for what happened. The failure gets handed back as personal. At the exact moment a structural account would be most useful, the ideology makes the account hardest to reach. And the emotional weight for someone who genuinely believed, whose family sacrificed years of income for this, isn't just disappointment. It's something closer to the collapse of framework through which they understood their own life.
Gosh, that's heavy. Okay, so let's bring all of these things together. So essentially, we're looking at three countries with different histories, but the same underlying logic produced an aspirational generation and make a huge promise and then fail to deliver it at scale.
And when that promise breaks, the system question itself. It turns structural failure into personal shortcoming. The graduate lacks initiative, the freeter lacks commitment. The students, they didn't try hard enough.
But what if the problem isn't the person? What if it's a promise that was never meant to hold for everyone it was extended to?
Then the real work begins, not in blaming ourselves, but in building a new kind of promise. One that starts with an honest account of what the system can actually deliver and for whom.
And that's where we leave it. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day ahead.